Pierre Dumain dies, leaving behind 2 adult children.
She said, I just had the hospital pull the plugs on Dad. What do you think? And I said, you should have had it done months ago.
The content of his will triggers a feud over a family fortune worth $250 million.
I have Dumain blood running through my veins just as much as Susie and Peter, and I should have a right to inherit that money.
A legal battle reveals a sordid family history of rivalry, betrayal, and infidelity.
My grandfather had an illegitimate child? I've never heard that.
Well, here I am, a living abortion.
August 1987. Pierre Dumain dies at the age of 75. He was a prominent member of a wealthy New England textile dynasty. The Dumain estate and family trust is valued at $250 million. Pierre, a widower, leaves behind his 2 children, Susie and Peter.
My sister called me at work, and I knew exactly what she had to say. She said, I just had the hospital pull the plugs on Dad. What do you think? And I said, you should have had it done months ago.
When Pierre Dumain dies, his family has already been torn apart for years. Along with his sister Susie, Peter is naturally in line to inherit from his father's estate. But when Pierre delivers his last wishes in a pre-recorded speech, his children are in for a surprise.
He didn't leave me a thing. The only thing that I got, and my sister stole it from his house, was my grandfather's silver cigarette box.
But the biggest revelation is yet to come. One that will trigger a legal battle over a $250 million trust that was originally established by Pierre's father, Frederick Christopher Dumain.
My grandfather, F.C. Dumain, was a self-made man. He came from very poor parents.
In spite of his modest background, F.C. Dumain quickly rises through the ranks of the Amoskeag textile plant in Manchester, New Hampshire. By the time he reaches the senior position of treasurer in 1905, Amoskeag is one of the largest textile firms in the world.
He was taught by his mother to save half of everything he earned, and that's how he started to amass a lot of money.
As the years pass, F.C. Dumain invests his money wisely. He takes control of a shipyard and a railroad, and by the 1920s, he is one of the richest Americans in his time.
He was a legend in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is a company town.
Charles de Grandpré grew up in Manchester hearing many stories of F.C. Dumain.
The Amoskeag Manufacturing Company was personified by the old man. He ran a company town and ran it roughly, and he was not a loved man, and he was an autocrat.
F.C. Dumain imposes strict rules on his employees. They have to go to church every Sunday. They can't consume alcohol, and they have a 10 p.m. curfew. F.C.'s family is also subject to his moral values. Born from French-Canadian immigrants, F.C. inherits a conservative and religious attitude, values that would dictate how the family's wealth should be passed on in the years to come.
He was very adamant about being very moralistic and that the right, proper thing is done.
F.C. Dumain is married to Bessie Thomas, the daughter of the revolutionary Isaiah Thomas. Pierre Dumain is the youngest of their children.
My grandfather had 7 children, 3 boys and 4 girls. There was Hatsy, who was the oldest. There was Betty, and then there was Uncle Buck, Then there was Aunt Harriet. Then there was Aunt Cordelia. Then there was Uncle Chris. And then my father.
But Bessie's liberal values would soon clash with FC's conservatism.
She was in every society thing that was going on at that point. And then when the women's suffragette came, of course, my grandmother, Bess, being of strong nature as she is, was all for it, and even marched down with flags saying for women's votes and stuff. I think my grandfather was a little chagrined about it. But he loved her so much that he sort of let her do what she wanted.
But the spouses' conflicting values proved to be too much. In 1919, Bessie divorces FC, leaving him to raise their children. For Pierre, the youngest, his mother will be dearly missed. FC becomes his sole parental figure, an imposing, authoritative father.
I think my father, Pierre, respected his father, maybe was intimidated a little bit by him. He would be the type that would push you up against the wall to see how fast you would come down fighting, and the quicker you came down, the better he liked it.
In 1920, with the help of legal advisors, F.C. Dumain creates a trust to benefit his legitimate children and grandchildren.
Frederick C. Dumain had 7 children, but he placed and preferred his son, Buck Dumain.
F.C.'s eldest son, Buck, is designated head of the trust. This entitles him to dictate how the proceeds of the multi-million-dollar trust shall be distributed to the Dumain family members. In other words, Buck has sole control over his siblings' income.
The power he gave Buck was bound to upset his siblings. Usually a trustee is given the power to pay equally amongst the children. But Buck had extraordinary powers over the trust, had the power to stop income.
From a young age, Buck is given important responsibilities in the family business. As F.C.'s eldest daughters are sent off to school to be formally educated, Buck stays behind to learn firsthand from his father how to run the company.
He nurtured Buck along to take his place, which he well should have. He was the oldest son.
10 years later, Pierre, the youngest son, follows in the footsteps of his brother and gets involved in the company business. Buck is now in a senior position in the company and on the brink of taking over from their father.
My father, Pierre's relationship to his brother, Buck, was strained.
Company secretary Evelyn Humphreys finds herself in the middle of the power struggle that quickly emerges between the two brothers. Even though Buck is married, he relentlessly makes advances on her. Advances that irritate his brother Pierre. Evelyn's connection to the Dumain brothers would have a profound impact on later generations. Pierre eventually marries. He and his wife Margaret have 2 children, Susie and Peter. But Pierre struggles to be a nurturing father.
Well, my father, I don't know whether he knew how to be a father, and not that kids come with instructions.
Seeking a father figure, Peter turns to his uncle Buck.
Buck and I seemed to have a rapport that we were able to get along.
Buck's tough attitude pleases young Peter, who for the same reasons enjoys spending time with his grandfather.
The one thing that I always remember is walking into his house and that smell of cigar tobacco. First things I remember, he used to call me Johnny, and he used to get so mad because I'd say my name is Peter. And I think that's one of the reasons why he liked me so much. I wasn't going to take any guff from him.
Peter visits his grandfather frequently, and FC teaches him one of his favorite pastimes, riding horses.
I could be put in the saddle and not even let the stirrups down. That's how little I was. And we would ride down into the woods, and then we would stop, and he would lift me off the horse and set me on the trunk of a tree or something, and he would tell me different stories.
One story in particular remains with Peter to this day.
Grandfather always used to like to go riding with his children in the morning. And that's one reason why when, I think it was Theodore Roosevelt asked my grandfather and grandmother if they wanted to spend the night in the White House, that my grandfather reneged and said he had to get home and ride with his children, and my grandmother was furious.
Growing up, young Peter becomes very close to the Dumain Patriarch. But in 1951, the old man's health quickly deteriorates. Sensing his death is near, FC calls his grandson Peter to his side to give him one last piece of advice.
Grandfather did tell me that towards the end of his life. Don't ever get a woman pregnant or you'll be cut off. So I took that quite to heart, believe me, quite to heart.
It would take decades before Peter would grasp the full magnitude of this warning. A few weeks later, the patriarch dies, but his moral values stay well alive in the family. Buck now assumes the role of patriarch, and it would not be long before Pierre, who is nicknamed Spike, goes to court to dispute his brother's mismanagement of the family trust.
Spike contended the trustees, mainly Buck, had misused their powers in the way they invested their money for their own benefit.
From their young age, Pierre and Buck's relationship had been marked by rivalry. But this confrontation would leave deep scars in their relationship forever. Pierre loses the case, and Buck retains his ultimate power to run the Dumain Trust. But the two brothers will soon embroil themselves in another battle. And this time, it's not over money. It's over a woman.
I think a child knows something's going on. And my sister and I knew something was going on.
Pierre Dumain dies, leaving behind a multi-million-dollar trust and 2 adult children. But a mysterious woman is about to come forward to claim what she says is rightfully hers. 1,000 miles south of Manchester in the state of Alabama, 21-year-old Elizabeth Charney is pregnant with her second child. She's broke and already struggling to provide for her first son, AJ.
I worked really hard to raise my children, and making a living. Growing up was really hard for them, but they knew what it was to eat. We used to call it potato soup. It was just potatoes and water.
Elizabeth was brought up by adoptive parents. Now in her 20s, she informs them of her wish to know more about her biological parents.
I said, I just really want to know my background so that I can pass down some of my natural self to my children.
When Elizabeth contacts the lawyer who handled her adoption, she learns that her call had been expected for years.
Apparently, my natural parents had also contacted him, and the lawyer sent me their letters.
Elizabeth is able to arrange a meeting with her natural parents. The reunion takes place a few days later at a motel in Birmingham, Alabama.
I remember being so nervous, but calm at the same time. And we went into the hotel parking lot, and I saw this man, and I just knew instantly that he was my father.
Elizabeth's natural father is Pierre Spike Dumain, and her mother is the former company secretary, Evelyn Humphreys. The same Evelyn Humphreys that Pierre's older brother Buck had pursued years earlier. As their daughter was growing up in Alabama, Evelyn and Pierre had finally become husband and wife.
They met at some motel someplace, and somebody told me as she and whoever was with her were walking down the driveway to the motel, she was bouncing up and down saying her father loved her, her father loved her, her father loved her, etc., etc.
My mother, Evelyn, I think was more nervous that very day. She gave me a necklace, an amethyst necklace that her mother had made for her I just knew that they loved me and I loved them like no years had ever passed.
Pierre and Evelyn soon arranged for Elizabeth to fly to their estate in Maine.
I remember getting off the airplane in Portland, Maine. Daddy was there to pick me up, and when we drove up to the house, it was very nice, very, very nice house. I didn't really give thought about money or anything.
Pierre and Evelyn explained to Elizabeth how they were forced decades earlier to give her up for adoption. In those days, Evelyn was working as Pierre's secretary.
My father was having an affair with my mother, and she got pregnant with me.
But Pierre is married to Margaret at the time, and the baby is soon perceived as a threat to the respectability of the Dumain name.
I was a change-of-life baby, so it was kind of a surprise to everybody.
As patriarch of the Dumain family, Buck reacts strongly to the news of Evelyn's pregnancy.
My Uncle Buck was very upset about my father's infidelity.
They were not willing to abort me, even though it was illegal. People with money could do those things, and they weren't willing to do that.
Buck exercises his authority over the family trust to put pressure on his brother.
There was in the trust a morality clause, and Buck used that to cut my father off.
And so my father actually sent my mother to Europe, supposedly on business, for about 8 months, and then brought her back to New York City, where I was born on January 19th, 1956, in French Hospital, New York City.
Payments were resumed to Spike by Buck, but the lesson had been learned that they all should stay in line or they would lose the income of this enormous trust.
Shortly after her birth, Elizabeth is adopted by Nelda and John Scudder. They will never keep Elizabeth's adoption a secret from her.
My mom and dad, Scudder, were some of the most giving, generous, loving people. And as I get older, I realize that they always read to us as children. And one of the books they read was The Chosen Baby, which is about adoption. I still have the book. And it talks about adoption, and they explain that I was the chosen baby and that I was adopted.
In March 1961, Pierre divorces Peter and Susie's mother, Margaret. And only 1 week later, he marries Evelyn. Elizabeth discovers that they were thinking of her at the time.
They went to Virginia to get married because Virginia is one of the states that when a couple gets married and already has a living child born out of wedlock, the marriage legitimizes that child.
Pierre and Evelyn then make a gesture to Elizabeth's adoptive parents to ensure her financial security.
They had tried to set up a trust for me when I was 5 or 6 years old. And Mom and Dad Scudder said they would take the trust, but it had to be split between Henry, my adopted brother Henry, and myself. And they didn't, want to do that. And so they never did set up the trust.
Meanwhile, Evelyn continues to hold vigil for her lost baby girl.
My dad, Pierre, said that every year on my birthday, Evelyn would go into her room and go into a depression for several days. I can't imagine giving up a child.
Through the lawyer who handled the adoption, Pierre and Evelyn continue to keep constant tabs on Elizabeth.
The lawyer knew the Scudders, and so the lawyer kind of played a go-between. So Evelyn knew all about me growing up. She even had some of my report cards. They knew everything about me.
Now reunited with her parents, Elizabeth is adamant she is not interested in the Dumain's wealth.
I would never ask my dad or mom for anything. They offered. They offered to fly us up to Maine, which they did. I wasn't calling all the time, and I said, I just can't afford the phone bill. And they said, don't worry, call collect every day or every week, but we want to hear from you. That was Dad's thing, you know, you need to call every week. I knew they were comfortable. I'm not stupid, not totally stupid. I mean, I was very naive, but I would never even dream of asking them for anything. Honestly, the most important thing was having that complete self of finding my dad and my mom.
As the years pass, Elizabeth spends time with her parents and discovers details about the Dumain dynasty.
We would spend a lot of our time, or most of our time, sitting and talking, and they had a fireplace in there. Pierre would tell me stories, so many stories about how Grandpa started as an errand boy and worked his way up. And I think that meant so much to him because it was the promise of America, you know, that you could become anything. And I always grew up, I think my dad, Scudder, and Mom, Nelda, also raised me up believing that there were endless possibilities in your life. You could do anything. But that meant a lot to my dad, Pierre, that his dad started out as an errand boy and ended up owning these companies and becoming one of the wealthiest men in the United States and having correspondences and socializing with the presidents.
Pierre slowly starts to involve his newfound daughter in family gatherings. At some point, he specifically arranges for Elizabeth to meet her half-sister, Susie. Elizabeth still remembers the discussion they had when they went for a walk that day.
She was nice, but she said, I thought you were an abortion. I knew that Evelyn was pregnant with you, but I thought they had an abortion. And I said, well, here I am, a living abortion, you know. I just didn't pay any attention to it. I just thought that was her way of being surprised that she knew I existed.
Gradually, Susie starts to warm up to Elizabeth and her sons.
I remember my sister, Susie, coming to visit, and AJ even called her Mama, because it was uncanny how much we looked alike. My dad talked a lot about Susie. He loved Susie. He, you know, shared a lot of things about her.
But Elizabeth's half-brother Peter is conspicuously absent from her father's life.
Dad told me he was angry at Peter for siding with the opposite side of the family.
Peter has never forgiven his father for cheating on his mother. And the two men haven't talked to each other since Pierre's wedding to Evelyn.
I felt my father was completely wrong. My sister, I think, made an effort to be more of a child to him. And she did stay friendly to him throughout all of this stuff, but I just did not think that he did the right thing by my mother and the family. And even my mother said, well, Peter, you really should try to have a relationship with your father. At one point, when my sister was married and had 4 kids, her husband was fooling around, so she went up to my father so that she would have a place to stay. And he told her that she could not stay, that he did not have enough money to take her in. And she called me from Maine, telling me what happened, and I said, get yourself over here. At least we can all sleep under a roof. And while she was coming over, I said to my wife, Nancy, I said, as far as I'm concerned, my father has just passed away. No father should put his children out, no matter if he has no money or has no roof over his head. He should always take them back in. So I never talked to my father after that.
But the long-lasting dispute with his son eventually leads Pierre to rewrite his will. In a recorded message intended for his family, he explains the details of his last wishes.
The will stated specifically that my sister and I were to inherit equally, and that Peter was not to inherit from my father Pierre's estate.
But Peter is a fighter. Just like he did as a child, he turns to his Uncle Buck, who reassures him about the money.
Everybody would say, Peter, you have no worries. Don't worry about it.
And as Pierre ages, the Dumain children are covertly getting ready for a battle.
Dad was on his deathbed, and that's when she turned on me.
Elizabeth Charney has been reunited with her biological parents, Pierre and Evelyn Dumain, for more than 10 years. It's like a fairy tale come true. Her parents are overjoyed that she is back in their lives, but their health is failing. In January 1987, Elizabeth's parents come to visit her and her sons. It will be the last time Elizabeth sees her mother, Evelyn.
The sad thing was that on the way home, my mom, Evelyn, had a heart attack. I never forget that because we had celebrated my 30th birthday together, and I was supposed to go visit again right after or near my 31st, and she died. We had her funeral in the spring. I remember they said the Psalm 17. That was her favorite Bible verse.
At her mom's funeral, Elizabeth starts to feel like she's truly one of the Dumains.
Daddy had one of the limousine drivers take me to the airport. He had given me one of Mom's mink jackets. And so here I am in this limousine with a mink jacket, and I'm thinking, boy, do I feel like a movie star now.
Elizabeth realizes she may soon be able to enjoy a much more comfortable life. She's an heir to her father's family fortune, and his health is deteriorating.
After Evelyn died, he was brokenhearted, but he was also sick.
Soon after Evelyn's death, Pierre has a heart attack. For days, a life support system is all that keeps him alive. Susie is the only sibling at his bedside.
I called her to find out my dad's condition while he was still in the hospital. She was curt and said, if you want to see him, you need to get up there, and basically hung up the phone. That was the last conversation I have ever had with her. Dad was on his deathbed, and that's when she turned on me.
Elizabeth is en route to see her father when Susie asks for the respirator to be unplugged. Pierre Dumain dies at the age of 75.
I just felt like I lost one of my best friends.
After her father has taken his last breath, Susie calls her brother Peter to break the news to him. Despite a lifelong estranged relationship with his father, Peter tells his sister he'll be at the funeral, just to make sure his dad is dead and buried in his casket.
I said, well, I'll be up. She said, you're coming? I said, yes, I want to make sure he's in it.
At her father's funeral, Elizabeth meets her brother Peter for the first time.
She came racing at me with her arms open, saying something to the effect, oh, my long-lost brother. And just as she got to me, I ducked away from her, moved over to my sister, and I said, I don't think so.
He was just very clear. He didn't accept me, he didn't recognize me, and he didn't want me there.
Susie also turns a cold shoulder to Elizabeth.
You know, she didn't want to talk, and I didn't know what was going on.
Susie is finally revealing her true feelings about her half-sister.
The reason Susie had anything to do with me while Dad was alive was because Dad had said that if she did not accept me, he would cut her off as well. And the way that he obviously did cut Peter off, I suppose she was afraid that he really would.
And now that Pierre is dead, Elizabeth is on her own.
The family was supposed to go in the limousines. Well, everybody went, and my sons and myself were left behind.
Elizabeth and her sons hitch a ride to the church in a pickup truck.
I guess I was a little hurt, to be honest with you. During the funeral service, I remember one of the uncanny things was that the flowers fell off Daddy's casket.
Bang, boom, bang. And all of a sudden, the blanket of roses slid onto the floor with a lot of noise. And I nudged my sister. I said, "I told you he wasn't in it."
And I remember saying, "Well, he's not very happy today."
Shortly after the funeral service, Pierre's children gather in a room to listen to the tape of Pierre's last wishes. As expected, Peter inherits nothing from his father's estate.
When he died, he didn't leave me a thing, which is fine. I don't really care.
But Elizabeth and Susie are both named in the will.
The tape said basically that he didn't want us kids to fight. Now, what that was pointed at, I don't know. I think he probably realized that all of us being very strong individuals would probably start fighting over what we got out of his estate. After it was played, I turned to my sister and I said, "That's it, let's go." So I have no comment on it other than that it was played. I'm guessing, purely my guess, that it was pointed at all of us.
Peter doesn't challenge Pierre's will, and Elizabeth and Susie get a check for $200,000 each. It's a fraction of the Dumain family fortune, but more money than Elizabeth has had in her entire life.
It was like I won the lottery.
But like many lottery winners, Elizabeth is unable to handle her newfound wealth.
I tried to do good things with the money, and the money went. It went very quickly. And you'd be surprised at how people come out of the woodwork.
Elizabeth buys her ex-husband a car and hands over cash to her mother-in-law and needy friends. Within a year, she's blown her inheritance and is back to being broke. That's when she hears about the Dumain Trust, the one that was established by Pierre's father, F.C. And a lawyer tells her that her father's last wishes might not have been completely fulfilled.
In his will, it was stated that my dad wanted me to inherit from the trust. So that's what I was supposed to inherit too. The trust was equal to something like $250,000 a year for life. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of money.
This explains why Peter doesn't care about his father's estate. With his sister Susie, he gets as much money every year from the Dumain Trust. But why didn't Elizabeth get her share of this annual income?
I should have a right to inherit that money for my children's sake.
As the legal battle over the Dumain multi-million-dollar family trust ensues, shocking family secrets are revealed.
My grandfather had an illegitimate child? I've never heard that.
Pierre Spike Dumain dies, leaving $200,000 to each of his two daughters, Susie and Elizabeth. But Elizabeth discovers that her father also wanted her to benefit from a family trust, where the real money is. If she can make her case, she stands to gain up to $250,000 every year for life. But her half-brother and sister, Peter and Susie, are putting up a fight. Elizabeth hires lawyer Mark Langan to fight for the share of the Dumain fortune she's been denied.
The first thing, upon meeting Elizabeth, I was just struck by how much she looked like her father. She's very tall, and the genetic composition is just, very, very close.
In my heart, I had that stubbornness. I always call it the Dumain stubbornness, that if my father wanted me to inherit, there was no reason why, in my mind, that I shouldn't.
The media get wind of the story and have a field day. The rich siblings versus the poor half-sister is sensational press. Peter and Susie hire lawyer Charles de Grand Prix to defend their reputation and fight for what they feel is rightfully theirs.
Elizabeth Charney had gone on TV on one of the famous shows, Sally Jesse Raphael or something like that, and had spoken to People magazine and clearly painted a picture of my clients as the rich brothers and sisters who wouldn't let the poor, ugly half-sister in on their millions.
When the media was getting the wind of the story, I think they all came to us, from Geraldo, Sally Jesse Raphael, Oprah. I think, and I say this jokingly, I think Charles de Grand Prix purposely kept them away from me.
As a matter of fact, de Grand Prix specifically asks his clients not to retaliate publicly to Elizabeth's assertions.
Public relations-wise, it would be a disaster. They would look like they were excluding from the trust assets a person who they acknowledged was probably their sister. They did not deny that she was a half-sister. They just said she wasn't entitled to benefit from this trust.
In December 1990, the court hearings commence in F.C. Dumain's former company town, Manchester, New Hampshire.
We knew that with Mr. de Grand Prix representing Peter and Susie, it would be an uphill battle. Mr. de Grand Prix is one of the preeminent trust attorney in New Hampshire.
I was extremely nervous. I was worried about what to wear and all like that. I just looked straight ahead, tried to have no expression.
We have to go through those metal detectors. Well, our two lawyers, my sister, went through, and of course, when I went through, the alarms went beep, bop, boop, bop, bop, bop. So I had to stop, and it was my keychain. So anyway, I got through, and my sister and the two lawyers had already gone upstairs, and as I got to the top of the stairs, they were all laughing at me. And I thought it was because I'm the one that usually gets stuck in these things. And I said, yeah, I got stuck in the thing. She said, no, you just came up the stairs with the Charney girl. So they said, we thought you had taken sides with her, being very funny, of course. I said, I hardly think so.
It was very emotional. I was scared. I really felt alone.
The case begins with a spectacular twist. Elizabeth's attorney, Mark Langan, claims that Pierre Dumain was not the bad, cheating husband he appears to be. Langan informs the court that Pierre's wife at the time, Margaret, had in fact encouraged her husband to see Evelyn. Margaret had her own love interest, and it wasn't a man.
Margaret had already fallen in love with her childhood friend. And so the relationship between Pierre and Margaret had ended, and therefore when Pierre began a relationship with Evelyn, it was done with Margaret's knowledge and consent.
Langan continues to describe the lengths that Pierre went to recognize Elizabeth as his daughter. From his marriage with Evelyn in Virginia, to writing Elizabeth into his will as an heir to his estate and to the Dumain family trust.
The key point in our case was that every state, pretty much in the United States, has a statute that says that if the natural parents of children later intermarry, that the child shall be legitimate. The crux of our argument, that she was a legitimate child and therefore able to take under the terms of the trust.
She is not legitimate. She was born when my father was married to my mother. My father didn't marry Evelyn until 7 years after she was born. So there was no way she could be legitimate.
Or could she? After all, Pierre and Evelyn married in the state of Virginia purposely to legitimize their child.
Our argument was that when Pierre and Evelyn married each other, that she was legitimate from birth, and therefore her property interest in the trust locked in.
But Charles de Grandprix's key argument focuses on a totally different issue: the meaning F.C. Dumain gave to the word legitimate.
What did the old man, F.C. Dumain, mean when he limited his trust beneficiaries to legitimate children?
In a spectacular move, de Grandprix introduces the testimony of Frederick Meltzar, who was present when F.C. Dumain drafted his trust in 1920.
Frederick Meltzar said they had gone over each word. They had specifically discussed the term legitimate. Frederick C. Dumain intended by that term, quote, people born to parents who were married or subsequently married before their birth. This was the old-fashioned legitimate because Frederick Dumain was, quote, of the old school, unquote, a perfect picture of the old man.
The court will have to decide if the modern legal definition of an illegitimate child prevails over the meaning that F.C. Dumain had in mind when he drafted his trust in 1920. And one question remains: why was F.C. Dumain so focused on the issue of illegitimacy? Realizing that her chance to inherit millions is at risk, Elizabeth does the unthinkable.
During the fight for the trust, at one point, Mark thought that if my mom and dad Scudder, John and Nelda, I don't know what the legal terms are, but like went and said that they reneged on the adoption, that it would help. And you know, that's pretty hard to even ask to do, but I did. And they were even willing to do that if it was what I wanted. And I didn't want that. But I was just trying to inherit from my father Pierre's wishes.
I just could not do that to my adopted parents for any type of money. I don't care if there was hundreds of millions of dollars. To throw that into the face of people who had cared for me and loved me and taken care of me, I just couldn't do that. So that made me think the type of girl she was.
You know, that had to hurt. I know that now. As a mother, I couldn't imagine my kids saying, you know, I just want to say that you're not my mother to people. Is that okay? And because she didn't birth me, but she was my mother. I am as much Evelyn as I am Nelda. Just because I don't have Nelda's blood, I hope to be as good a person as she was. I try to be what she was. She was so smart and so giving. And I really miss her. I really miss her.
As we got ready to make our arguments, someone told me that F.C. Dumain had himself an illegitimate child and thus wanted to make sure no illegitimate children ever benefited from this trust. When I learned that fact, I just didn't know what to do. Should I mention it in the court argument I was about to make?
The old man, F.C. Dumain, is about to be unmasked. But will his past transgressions help Elizabeth's case?
We estimated that Elizabeth would stand to gain about $10 million.
Pierre Spike Dumain clearly states in his will that he wants his daughter Elizabeth to inherit from his father's multi-million-dollar trust. But Elizabeth's half-brother and sister argue that she is not a legitimate child of their father's, and therefore she's not entitled to inherit. When their lawyer is about to give his argument to the court, it's revealed to him that the old man, F.C. Dumain himself, had an illegitimate child.
There had always been rumors that F.C. and his secretary were very close. When he would travel up to Manchester, he'd leave his family home and he'd stay up there several days.
In spite of all their differences, F.C. Dumain and his son Pierre had something in common after all.
Spike's behavior almost mimicked F.C.'s.
Minutes before his closing argument, de Grand Prix realizes it's too late for him to factually prove F.C. Dumain had any illegitimate children. But it sheds light on why the old man wrote his trust the way he did.
My bet is F.C. Dumain had an illegitimate child. And that's why that unusual, very, very unusual language was put into that trust. Because F.C. Dumain wanted to make sure his illegitimate child did not take under his trust.
Finally, the judge renders his decision, and he doesn't mince his words.
When the court declared in the answer from the judge, it says, that I am a legal bastard child. That just really, I cried a lot over that. Not because I was ashamed of my parents or ashamed of who I am. It just kind of hurt. It still does. And I always tell my children, I don't want them to cuss at all, but if they ever say anything, they're never to say that word, because that just kind of hits home,
The judge adopts the old man's definition of the word illegitimate. And the court rules that the old man Dumain's wish prevails over that of his son Pierre. Elizabeth and her two sons, Robert and AJ, will never receive a penny of the Dumain's multi-million-dollar trust.
It may seem unfair, but that's what F.C. Dumain dictated.
I've got thick skin, and I'm over it. If Dad Pierre was alive, he'd be right back in court somehow. He would not have allowed them to rest, I think. He would have fought it all the way.
We always wondered, why did Spike Dumain, during his lifetime, not legitimize Elizabeth Charney? Spike Dumain could have gone to court through a procedure and made her officially his legitimate daughter. Had he done that, she would have had a much stronger case. I don't think he ever gave it any thought, frankly.
I don't understand why Susie and Peter fought me. That kind of money, surely, even a little bit of it, are they really going to miss it? But that's not my say. That was the court's decision. My dad did everything he could so that I would inherit. The courts decided that I wasn't entitled to inherit, and Susie and Peter never have contacted me, made it clear that they don't want any part of me, and I hope that they're happy. But honestly, I think they lost out knowing me and knowing their nephews.
I don't really care to have a relationship with Miss Charney. If I wanted to make friends with my so-called half-brothers, I think I would approach them on, yes, I'd like to be your brother, but I have no claim to your trust. and I'm not making a claim to your trust.
I will always be a Dumain. I have Dumain blood running through my veins just as much as Susie and Peter. My children have as much as their children, and nothing can change that. Not $1 can change that.
To this day, whether the old man F.C. Dumain really had an illegitimate child remains a mystery.
My grandfather had an illegitimate child. I can't imagine who it would have been.
Did F.C. Dumain, that famous, staunch Yankee, wander off the path and himself fall to the sexual mores of the day? I would love to know the answer. Wouldn't we all love to know the answer?